sneaking up on our freedoms, destroying our health, shredding the Constitution, taking away our wealth. But we're the men and women following freedom's trail, following where the truth leads. We will prevail.
And indeed, we will prevail. This is Rima MD. I am the medical director of the Natural Solutions Foundation, and I welcome you to this broadcast along with my co-host, Ralph Fusatola, JD, trustee and counsel of the Natural Solutions Foundation. Good morning, Ralph.
Good morning, Dr. Rima. Good to hear your voice, and we're looking forward to a great program with a really excellent guest today.
We have an outstanding guest today. Dr. Theresa Dale is our guest. We'll be hearing from her in a little while. She's a physician who has learned the very hardest of ways about radiation. She's a physician who has learned the very hardest of ways about nutrition. And instead of just keeping the knowledge private for herself, because you know what often happens is that physicians and other healthcare providers and professionals who find out that conventional medicine is not working for them or is killing their families, or you know, the things that we all know, instead of going the natural route for themselves and then continuing business as usual, and I do emphasize the business part, business as usual, Dr. Dale decided that she would use the same natural methods for her patients and disseminate information for the world, kept her safe. Ralph, can you put your phone on?
I will do so. Absolutely. I'll put my phone on
mute or dead or whatever it is you do to the phone. Good. Okay. So we'll be hearing from her in a little while. First, as always, we need to talk about the health freedom news of the week. And I think the place to start is 30 years ago. Woodrow C. Monte, M-O-N-T-E, who is the professor emeritus of nutrition at Arizona State University, in January of 2011, saw a memo that has been kept secret for 30 years. So our news today, and today July 8th, 2012, but it was revealed that Professor Monte saw a memo in January of 2011. The memo was 30 years old at that time. And the memo proves that the FDA knew in 1978 that laboratory tests showed birth defects and developmental brain damage caused by aspartame. So from 1978 forward, aspartame made by Searle. At that time, Searle was headed by a CEO whose name you may know, Donald Rumsfeld, was pushing the approval of a substance known to cause birth defects and developmental brain damage. That substance was kept out of approval, off the approved FDA list for 11 years. 11 years, through the actions of people like Jim Turner, our health freedom attorney, saying to the FDA, you cannot do this, you cannot approve this, this is dangerous, it causes a vast array of horrible things in the body and in the baby inside the mother's body. Don't do this. First thing that Reagan did was appoint a new head of the FDA. And the first thing the new head of the FDA did was, shazam, approve aspartame. Wonderful. Now, you don't have to like it, but you have the choice to not consume it. I happen to think that the FDA, the Fraud and Death Administration, should be dissolved and disbanded, and it would be lovely to have everybody in a decision-making position, go to jail, but that's not going to happen. I think the FDA should be disbanded. I think it should be broken into two separate agencies, one for drugs, one for foods and cosmetics. And I think that those two agencies should be organized differently from the way federal agencies are organized now. They should be removed from the federal government, and there should be a watchdog commission. Anyone found with a functional or financial association to the industries that they regulate should be subject to immediate loss of their personal assets and immediate prosecution. That, I believe, would help the situation at least for 10 to 15 years, and then we'd have
then we'd have to reform it again, Dr. Rima. Something that Thomas Jefferson told us was a necessity once a generation.
Yes, exactly. So I believe that the reality is that the FDA is one of the greatest threats to human health on the planet. And I believe that behaving passively as if something is okay, go away, is not acceptable. I would just want to make that enormously clear. When you start thinking about the FDA, you immediately think of vaccines, or at least I do. And there's another news story of significance. But before we get to the vaccine news story, which actually is one of the best pieces of news that I've heard in a long, long time, I'd like to know what you as a lawyer think about what I've just said, Ralph.
Regulation is a very significant issue that we all have to think a lot about. One of the problems we face is that the regulators inevitably are experts, and therefore they come from the industry that they regulate. This is seen in a number of areas, such as the number of Goldman Sachs former members that are in the Treasury Department and the Federal Reserve. The very people who are being regulated, and remember, it's not industries that are regulated, it's not, abstracts that are regulated, all those things, corporations and states and stuff, those are all legal fictions. It's only individuals who think, only individuals plan, only individuals engage in human action. So regulation controls individual decisions and actions. That's what regulation does. And when you have the regulators themselves are individuals who are acting. So you really don't have, you don't have a dynamic that can ever be anything other than self-serving. And that's of course one of the big problems. Yes, we need to create institutional controls over the regulators. We need to regulate the regulators so that they can regulate what they're supposed to regulate, and then we have to regulate the people who regulate the regulators. And it's an infinite regress on a certain level. But surely what we're doing now is bad, and most any change might be for the better. So let's do what Thomas Jefferson said. Let's mix things up every once in a while and see what happens.
The problem is that the people with the power and the interest to mix things up are corporate people, are primarily corporate people like Monsanto. Right now, the Congress of the United States is about to make a cataclysmically important decision on something misnamed the Farmer Protection Amendment.
Right.
The Farmer Protection Amendment has already been passed by the House. The question is, will it be passed by the Senate? Or I believe it's been passed by the House. It is before the House. It's a very short sentence attached as an amendment to the Farm Bill and for fiscal 2013. It says that Monsanto and other biotech companies, it doesn't name Monsanto, of course, it says that biotech companies are essentially immune from federal control. What it specifically says is that the Secretary of the United States Department of Agriculture is required to, not authorized or permitted to, but required to approve the use, the widespread planting of GMO crops, even if the courts have ruled that they may not be planted because the environmental impact statement has not been completed or even has not been started, which says that the biotech companies are immune from the actions of the courts. This is a disastrous precedent, equal in fact to the exemption from responsibility, liability of the vaccine industry given by the Congress and by the FDA to another of the most dangerous factors in our world, another genocidal technology. Because make no mistake, GMO crops and foods and products are in fact genocidal. There's no question of that now. And similarly, vaccines are genocidal. I will remind you that Melinda Gates made a public announcement not long ago that she was overcoming her personal objections, because as a practicing Catholic, birth control is abhorrent to her. She was overcoming her personal objections and creating her own foundation for the purpose of delivering to women around the world injections which would render them sterile at their request. This is her version of what her husband is doing with children, which is killing them, with vaccines so positioned as philanthropic generosity on an unprecedented scale. It is, if you remember, Bill Gates's statement in a TED lecture that was widely publicized, and we published the link, that properly used, this is his statement, properly used, vaccines can reduce the population by 10 to 15%. Now Melinda has decided to go one better. 10 to 15 cents, Bill Miboyo, forget 10 to 15%. Let's go for, I don't know, 30, 40%, 50% maybe. We'll just make women permanently, irreversibly infertile. We're already doing that with Gardasil, are we? Well, that's not working fast enough and furiously enough because poor women aren't getting Gardasil. Gardasil is really expensive. So we'll do this one-time shot. I have no doubt that they didn't announce what's in the shot. What's in the shot is human chorionic gonadotrophin, the very same stuff, by the way, that I put a tiny amount of into my body when I'm on an HCG protocol.
Right.
But when you make antibodies against it, and my protocol is very carefully constructed so that I don't make antibodies against it, or if I were a woman in her childbearing years, I would not make antibodies against it. But if you do make antibodies against it, then what you have is a sterility vaccine, an irreversible sterility vaccine, because there is no possibility that the human body can carry a fetus or a baby unless there is human chorionic gonadotrophin in the body. It is a normal hormone produced in order to maintain the pregnancy. If you make antibodies against it, which is what this vaccine is probably doing, then there is no pregnancy that can ever result. Conception can take place, but implantation will not be successful because the body will not maintain, the uterus will not accept the embryo. So we're talking about Melinda Gates overcoming her religious objections to reduce the population through a sterility vaccine positioned as philanthropy. Astounding. But there's even more vaccine news, which I will read, unless maybe I'll stop and give you a chance, Ralph.
Well, you're on to vaccines. I was trying to find information about the Agriculture Act, and it appears that actually it was passed on June 26th in the Senate, and it is being held at the desk, which means the Senate hasn't sent it to the House yet.
Thank you.
All right, but talking about vaccines, this is such an important issue.
Before you go to vaccines, Representative DeFazio from Oregon has introduced a countervailing amendment, which says that this immunity from the courts cannot happen. You see, what we're looking at is a philosophy of government saying that corporate persons are too big to be controlled.
Right.
Not too big to fail, but too big to comply. So the Constitution and the laws of the country might apply to little people like you and me, but certainly not to the multinational corporate persons, which they now are, thanks to an insane ruling by the rather bizarre Supreme Court of the United States. So what we have is a push to exempt corporations from the law. Now, the government is rather exempt from the law, essentially. It can do pretty much what it wants, and maybe we can catch up to it if it gives us permission to sue it. Maybe not, usually not. So the government exempts itself from the law. Regulators are pretty much exempt from laws. And now corporate persons who are merging with the government are in the process of being exempted from the law. This is a very dangerous situation. We can either accept it and say, oh, well, this is too big for my little head, or we can damn well do something about it.
I agree with you, Dr. Rima. It is absolutely essential that we begin to get a grip on these fictions, these legal fictions known as corporations that are used, and government agencies and all the rest, that are used by individuals as excuses for engaging in behavior that would cause them to be pariahs in their own community if they were doing it for their own private benefit. Interesting comments coming up on on our chat window. They're talking about chipping people. I noticed an article in Natural News about mosquito-sized drones being created. A lot of new technology coming at us in various ways right now that seem to put us all at risk. New technologies, but I see an article about an old matter as well. And there's apparently been a study of mummies recently, and the mummies, which are of course been generally upper class people, presumably in Egypt, only 1 out of 100 had any signs of cancer of these 2,000 and 3,000 and 4,000 year old mummies. Apparently, cancer was not much of an issue back in those days. And
cancer was quite rare back in those days when I graduated from medical school.
Back in the time of Nefertiti, I got it.
Yes, one of my patients was Nefertiti, exactly. I graduated in 1970.
So you finally tell us who the head of state was, okay, in your famous story.
My patient. But she had aged really well. She was doing monkey glands in Switzerland for a long time. The reality is, at this point, that approximately 1 person in 2 will develop cancer of one sort or another. That's appalling. The World Health Organization has said, and I've said this before, so some of you may already have heard me say it, the World Health Organization a couple of years ago made the statement that any child born after 2000 will have a statistical probability of dying before the parents of that child die. That was one of their statements. And they also said that by 2020, 50% of the children of the world will by the time they reach the age of 18, either have died from cancer or have survived cancer treatment. That means that 50% of the children who reach the age of 18 in 2020, that is children born in 2002 and thereafter, 50% of them worldwide are expected to develop cancer. They'll either die from it or they won't die from it by their 18th birthday.
That is astounding.
That is an astounding statistic. Let me repeat that in my medical school years from 1966 to 1970, when the genetics were identical to what they are now, with the exception of the depredation of the genomicidal technologies, if a child developed cancer other than a kidney tumor called a Wilms, WILM''S, Wilms tumor, if a child developed any kind of cancer other than Wilms tumor, it was considered a medical rarity, an oddity, because the immune system of children, we were told, was so robust and so multifunctional that children did not develop cancers, except rarely. Now, from 1966, let's say 1970, until 2020 is not so many years. We're talking about 50 years. And in that time, we have despoiled the genome. We have despoiled the planet so thoroughly that we are slaughtering our young. We are destroying their brains. How many pregnant women drink soda or eat food or
diet soda, even worse,
which contains aspartame,
of course,
or neotame, or sucralose, or any of the other artificial sweeteners? How many? And how many of them are damaging both themselves and their babies? How many of them eat GMO foods which pass the gut boundary, enter the body, or the DNA of which enters the body, and then causes genetic changes, the natures of which we are only beginning to understand, and none of it is good? How many of us are set up for slaughter by the depredations permitted by our regulators? How many of us? The answer is 100%. 100%.
And they tell us that we're being alarmist when we talk about genomicide and genocide.
Well, they who tell us that
Yes.
are either fools or puppets.
Indeed.
They can tell us anything they like. Back during the Vietnam War, they told us that we didn't know what we were talking about, and we were fighting a war like all other wars to preserve our way of life and defend democracy. Oh, really? Were we fighting to preserve and protect the low sulfur oil in the Bay of Tonkin? I do believe. They told us back in 1917 that we were fighting a war to end all wars. Oops! They told us that we're fighting a just war in the Second World War. No. Given the fact that the uber wealthy pay for the just wars on both sides and reap the profits from the just wars, and the war to end all war and the war to defend our way of life, blah, 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 blah. What we know is there is a war. It's a continuing war, and it's against us. And part of the war is information, disinformation. Just as dis-ease is a lack of ease, so disinformation is the intentional spreading of lies and distortions, and they seek to capture the minds, the hearts, and the apathy, to mobilize the apathy of the masses. Think about that. This is going to offend some of you, but New Age thinking, though it may have things in it that are correct, New Age thinking, like fatalism, is very useful for the powers that be because it mobilizes your apathy. Look how mobilized the apathy of the American people is. Where are our anti-nuclear protests, as General Burt asked in his amazing webinar that was broadcast on July 5th? And unfortunately, we had some technical troubles, but we've been able to create an ebook that contains the webinar and also a video with the slides of General Burt's presentation. So why are we allowing them to mobilize our apathy? Why are we allowing them to mobilize our misinformed informational status, our beliefs? That's an interesting question. And I think I've never put it that way before. I've never thought about it that way, mobilizing apathy. But what we have is an intentionally mobilized mass apathy. Would you say so, Ralph?
I absolutely have to agree with you on that. And how is it mediated? It's mediated through the hypnosis of the media of mass deception. It's mobilized through the medium of psychoactive drugs like fluoride in the water supply. It's very carefully structured. That example I gave you a number of weeks ago, where we were traveling on our 4-city tour, and I was in, I think it was Dallas, in the hotel room with the local news reporters on, and it was the typical talking head sitting at a desk with this wonderful panorama of Dallas behind them. It was some sort of an image. It wasn't live, and in the sky over the buildings was a stylized set of lines, of white lines that could be part of a design or could be chemtrails, but they were part of the natural environment, if you will. It was there automatically. You can't think outside the box if all you ever see is the box. And I think that's certainly...
We're told that anything outside the box isn't real.
Right. And by the way, on a slightly different issue, folks out there listening to the program, if you're on the chat, we'd like to find out if you've been seeing any chemtrails or many chemtrails in the last couple of weeks. Dr. Rima and I and General Burt have been noticing, and we've been getting feedback from a few sources around the country, that there seems to be a change in the chemtrailing from the very obvious chemtrails. For example, if you go to our action item on chemtrails, you'll see a photo of some chemtrails over my home, which were very obvious and very low. Now they seem to be very high and very unobvious. Maybe.
Well, I have just Skyped you a link. I don't have enough bandwidth to be on the radio show and on the chat at the same time. So would you please add the link that I just sent you to the chat, and I will
absolutely
tell you what it's about. Not only does it appear that chemtrails are now being sprayed above the cloud level so that we don't see them. We don't see them. Apparently there's been enough of an outcry so that the people who are doing it are taking different measures, or they've changed the nature of the chemtrails and they're better dispersed or deployed at a higher altitude. Not only that, but
several hundred feet in the last years.
One second. Not only that, but we are getting chem clouds now. Chem
clouds, got it.
Very interesting. And if you look at this video that I asked Ralph to put up, you don't need the audio. It's meaningless. Somebody just says, oh, look, there's a chemtrail near my home. But 5 minutes and 30 seconds, there is a circular chemtrail which appears and reappears. Obviously, it's light refracting through chemtrail material which has been inserted into the sky, and it's quite horrifying. You need to see that, 5 minutes and 30 seconds. Now, Panama Red Gonzo has just made a comment that the cloud level has dropped. The cloud layer has come closer to Earth in the last, how long?
Since we began taking measurements of what the cloud levels were.
Since we began taking measurements of what the cloud levels were about 10 years ago, the cloud level has itself dropped. Airplanes are still visible flying at 30,000 feet. You can see their con or chem trails on many occasions. So one would assume that they have chosen to go higher for whatever reason. I have to assume, without further information, that the generalized protest of people saying, "Do not do this to my world,"
How un-American
excuse
would
me.
the government get if it ever forced this upon us?
Sorry.
Trust. Do
What's
you
that?
No, new technology on chemtrail. I was going to show people the video, but apparently I don't. Yeah, there we go.
Well,
Yeah, I don't want to do that.
the audio
Yeah.
on that video is not relevant. It's just gee whiz, golly, gee willikers. What's relevant on that particular video is the visuals.
Got it.
We're seeing changes in the way chemtrails are being applied. I think because people have become insistent that this technology not be permitted. It's one of the 5 genocidal technologies. Now, we're working on a new website. Frankly, our website, healthfreedomusa.org, right now is rather confusing because it's grown like Topsy and stuff has just been added to it one way and another. And we decided to bite the bullet and redo the entire website. So in the future, we hope in the not distant future, there'll be a brand new look and organization to the material, the vitally important material of the Natural Solutions Foundation. The way we've decided to organize it is to create an information structure that divides what's happening into the 5 big lies. There are 5 big lies that are killing us, controlling us, and eliminating us. Those 5 big lies are the things we've been talking about. And one of them is chemtrails. Ralph?
Yes.
What kind of legal recourse do I have as a citizen of the United States if the government of the United States is damaging my health, my food, my genome, my aesthetic environment, and my personal freedom and safety through a mass action which I have not given, an experimental mass action which I have not given my consent to?
This clearly does violate the Helsinki principles, but the Helsinki principles are really a private statement, a private declaration by the World Medical Association. Does it violate U.S. law? This is a very good question. There were rumors about statutes being proposed to outlaw this sort of behavior, but so far as I can tell, that hasn't happened. And I'm wondering, indeed, if the courts would say that there's any standing to sue, especially if the government claims national security in some way or other. I mean, that would stop any lawsuit in its tracks, unfortunately.
Everything is legal under the auspices of national security, and even when Congress says this is illegal, the DOJ has recently started saying, we don't care, we're not going to prosecute. I direct your attention to AG Holder.
Exactly.
Right.
I think that's very interesting. Congress says you're in contempt, and the Department of Justice says Yeah, but he's our boss, so we're not exactly in contempt. We are contemptuous of you, Congress, which is the same thing that Leon Panetta said when he said, we are contemptuous of you, Congress, because we do not require the advice and consent of Congress in order to engage in wars. We will advise Congress when we engage in a war. And the spineless, gutless, worthless Congress of the United States said, okay, all righty. Listen, can I get back to my golf game? And where's the latest lobbyist payment coming from?
Exactly. And of course, the Supreme Court in the Obama health tax case has determined that there's no limit on Congress's power to tax and spend. The limits we thought existed, that they could only tax and spend in pursuit of one of the enumerated powers, apparently doesn't apply anymore. And so it was illegal under the Commerce Clause for them to force everyone to buy insurance, but they can still tax you and call it a fine if you don't buy that insurance. Very strange indeed.
Go for it, Panama.
The CIA recently openly undercut the president's authority when it said that the president's legally required biannual report to Congress on military actions were unofficial comments and did not have any weight or authority, and no one in the American public should actually listen to what he said because the CIA did not say it. This was filed in a brief done by the CIA's lawyers in open court a couple of months ago.
I love it. You know what? Counsel Fusatola,
Yeah.
I would like to ask you a legal question. Are you prepared for my legal question?
Sure.
Excellent. Now, this is covered by attorney-client privilege, and the client is not only Dr. Rima, but it's the Natural Solutions Foundation. So,
And all of those who are in private expressive association with said foundation.
Exactly. Okay. Counsel Fusatola, where do I get some legal Rust-Oleum? You see, when you have a piece of steel and it's exposed to the corrosive effects of the atmosphere or the situation at that moment, what you do, as far as I know, is go to the hardware store and buy some Rust-Oleum and paint the sucker so that the corrosive atmosphere cannot further destroy the integrity and structure of the members of the steel that you are protecting. Or you can spray it with oil or in some other way protect it from the corrosive environment in which it finds itself. Now, the Constitution is being corroded by the environment in which it finds itself. The current time, the corporate merger of with the state, the worthless nature of the entire Congress of the United States, with the possible exception of onesies or twosies, but basically the 500 plus spineless, gutless, worthless traitors who sit in the hallowed halls of Congress are part of the corrosive atmosphere. So what I want to know, Counsel Fusatola, is just where I find some constitutional Rust-Oleum with some legislative pigment thrown in to protect the legislative structure and intent which has been built upon the constitutional girders. Just where do I find that?
Well, now that is a really good question. We thought that the electoral process might help in that area, but that's been a really interesting question as to why it hasn't been. Why is there no choices available that make any difference? Why are the two purported candidates for president both individuals who find the largest amount of financial support coming to them from people who work at Goldman Sachs? That's a really good question, what happens is that the population needs to take back their rights to control their own lives. I mean, it's simple enough to say it. There's a version of the Gladstone flag that I've seen around. The Gladstone flag is that snake with the don't tread on me. Well, instead of it saying don't tread on me, it says our ancestors would be shooting by now. Now, is that the only solution? I don't know. I have up on the screen right now a poster. It says, "Why choose the lesser of two evils?" And it shows an image of Cthulhu. If you're going to choose an evil, why not choose a real evil? Well, I don't think that's a good solution either. I think that the solution is for enough Americans to not just refrain from voting, because actually a majority of the voters usually do refrain from voting, but rather what's needed is a large number of Americans to vote for third-party candidates. It's necessary for the two official tax-supported, tax-eating parties to fear that there might be other parties coming along nipping at their heels.
I don't agree.
No, go ahead.
When Ralph Nader gathered a large number of votes, whether he was right or wrong in his positions is not the issue. What happened was that it even more firmly entrenched the power of the non-real, mythical two-party system. We really, of course, have a one-party system,
right,
and it's called the globalist.
We've tried third-party candidates. We've tried to take over one of the two main parties with people who are interested in freedom. I mean, the Ron Paul movement this past couple of years was one of the strongest challenges to the Republican establishment in a century. And it doesn't appear to have succeeded, although there are rumors that Tampa will be more of a more exciting event than just a coronation. So we tried that.
Exciting is irrelevant.
Mm-hmm.
Exciting doesn't matter. And third-party candidates, in my view, simply stabilize and establish the two-party system, the nominal two-party system. Gerald Celente, in an otherwise exquisite video, says his solution includes, his Second American Revolution includes, but actually the Second American Revolution has already occurred. The Constitution has been abrogated. It's over.
Yep.
He says that Americans should stay home because if more than 40% of American voters do not vote, then we can say that the election was illegitimate. And my response was, Gerald, what have you been smoking? There is nothing in the Constitution or in the laws of the United States, if they matter at all, that says if less than 40% of the voters vote, the election can be abrogated. What are you talking about? That's fantasy. Everything else that he was saying was based, I think, in very, very good analysis. But there is no point to be gained by pretending that if we don't vote, we gain power. The not voting is another example of the successful mobilization of apathy. I believe the answer is to demobilize apathy and to remobilize pathy. That is caring. Think about the word. A without. Pathy. Passion. That is the meaning of the word apathy.
Very interesting, Doctor.
So we have to mobilize passion. We have to mobilize empowerment. We have to mobilize not only care, but competence to manifest what we care about. That's our only hope. That is our only hope. And we damn better do it soon. That's why, for instance, General Burt has done 2 webinars on Fukushima. Not because talking about Fukushima can change anything, but because you then have enough information to make some serious choices. That's by the Natural Solutions Foundation is reorganizing itself to communicate better with people, to demobilize apathy and mobilize passion, mobilize empowerment. If we don't do that, we're dead. We're not just enslaved, we're dead, because they don't need us as slaves anymore. They tell us that. Read the Agenda 21 documents. Read them. Read the summaries about sustainable communities. You will be herded into urban ghettos. You will be placed in vertical living environments, walkable neighborhoods, which means you will not be permitted out of your barrio, out of your ghetto, unless it's useful to the state. Read Agenda 21. This is not paranoid flim-flam. This is not imagination. This is globalist policy. You will not own private property. All farmland will be owned by the international state. All means of production, all owned by the international state. Read Agenda 21. And if you are apathetic after that, I don't want to know you.
This is just Bolshevism without the Bolsheviks. Instead, the bankers are the well, actually, they were the Bolsheviks all the way through, weren't they?
They're the Banksheviks.
The Banksheviks. Excellent term. Excellent term. So we've been getting fairly philosophical in this show. It's been very interesting, Dr. Rima. It's 11:15 East Coast time right now, and we have an interview with Dr. Dale available for us, which lasts about 40 minutes. So
I want to talk about one other item before
please.
we queue up the pre-recorded interview with Dr. Theresa Dale, an amazing lady, and we're going to be finding ways to work closely with her. This is a news item which went by pretty quickly, but should be responded to again. A senior administrator at Austin Community College made it clear that enrollment numbers are collapsing at that institution because students are refusing to comply with vaccinations they are told are mandatory if they want to take classes. So they said, my world, my health, my way, I will go somewhere else. More than 10,000 students have refused to enroll because they refuse to take these injections. Although waivers for religious or personal objections are available, Austin Community College said that students were told that they were compulsory. And as a way of responding, they said, screw you.
They didn't need to take the services from that particular source because there are other places they can go where they're not going to have their bodies abused. I like that.
There's been a 15% decline in student enrollment since January. And that has forced the Austin Community College, listen to this, folks, if your apathy is still running high, wake up, drink some Valley of the Moon coffee, and get with the program. Because this 15% decline in students enrolling since January has forced the ACC to cancel 500 classes for the next semester. Now that's what we can do. We can say, hell no, it's my body, it's my world, it's my health, my way. That's our new slogan. Your world, your health, your way.
Excellent, Dr. Rima.
You have to find the actions and take them. We'll give you some of them, but here are the students self-organizing, auto-organizing.
This is a very good development, and it suggests that the entire vaccine myth is breaking apart. I mean, there was a recently studied paper, I understand, that seems to again give lie to the whole myth that vaccines do anything positive at all.
Right. There's new science emerging to support the old science, which has been there all along, which says that vaccines are based on a critically flawed scientific myth that has been perpetuated by people who make a ton of money, not just from the vaccines, but from the aftermarket, the cancer, the cardiovascular disease, the diabetes, the infertility, the neurological diseases. If you don't think that every autistic child is a profit center, think again.
Absolutely, Dr. Rima. That has become the model, and it's a model that was apparently developed a century ago or more, where the vaccines and the normal treatments themselves cause the need for further interventions. This is very interesting that this model of healthcare, which is the model that you might call the Rockefeller model of healthcare, is also the model of economic control. Every intervention by the state calls forth the need for further interventions, all to the profit of the banksters who sit in the toll position as the money washes from place to place.
Ultimately, every war calls for another war.
Indeed.
It's the same model. Healthcare, misnamed, of course, it's illness modulation. Illness modulation is the same as economic modulation. Healthcare is the same as peace care, which is the same as money care. It's all about mobilizing apathy and manifesting control that is to the benefit of the banksters. It's not to your benefit. Now, Dr. Dale doesn't use the word oppose or the word fight to deal with this. I do. We have different personalities. We come to the same conclusion. You'll hear her talk about that. It's a war. There's a war against you. My way of dealing with a war is to fight it. You don't want to fight it. You want to call it, you want to say countering it. Fine. I don't care what language you use. Don't call it a war. Call it a hot dog. I don't care. The point is, hopefully a sodium nitrate free hot dog. But the point is, we have to do something about it, and we have to do quite a lot about it, and it's worth bending our efforts to, instead of allowing our apathy to be mobilized. And with that, following your comments on what I just said, I think it would be a wonderful time to listen to Dr. Dale.
Excellent. Very, very good. I'm also at this point finding her website. Her name is Dr. Theresa Dale, PhD, CCN, MP of the Wellness Center for Research and Education. We're going to we have a nice image here of hers. Let's see if we can make that larger so that people can see it. And I will also, let me move that over here, folks. There is Dr. Dale, Revitalize Your Hormones. And we're going to hear her talk about a subject that we all are really interested in, and that subject is nothing more or less than radiation remediation, and remedies, and that's the key we all have to be aware of these days. Now, let me find this is the broadcast. Dr. Rima, folks, for the next 38 minutes, we have a pre-recorded section, and at the end of that, we'll be back with more information for you.
With us today, as our special guest, is Dr. Theresa Dale. She's the same kind of doctor that I am. She looks at the causes, she looks at the underlying issues, and she treats those, making sure that the disease or disorder is responsive to treating its underlying issues. She also, because she is the same kind of doctor that I am, she also looks at what's happening outside the physical body in front of her that the patient presents for treatment or for preventive care. she looks at what's going on in the patient's environment, and that means a wide view. And that view has taken Dr. Dale into a consideration of something that you've heard us talk about a lot of times here, specifically radiation from nuclear reactors and the impact on our environment, our bodies, and our future. Good morning, Dr. Dale.
Good morning, Dr. Rima. How are you?
I am as happy and as excellent as I can be, given the fact that reactors like Sonofrio and Fukushima are contaminating our world. Other than that, I'm just fine. How about you?
Well, I am really. Oh my goodness, whose phone is that? Okay, I am doing really, really well, Dr. LeBeau, and I think that one of the things that that I would like to discuss is how Fukushima can happen, and all of the things that have to be in place in order for it to happen. And we have a lot of those things in place in the United States in order for a nuclear disaster.
In fact, every one of
So what that
I think that's Ralph's phone. Every one of the nuclear plants
It's off now.
in the world is a potential Fukushima. Before we begin that, would you be kind enough to give us some information about you, how you came to be the kind of doctor you are and the kind of health freedom advocate that you are?
Yes, I am just putting my phone on off here so that I don't get interrupted anymore. I have been a health freedom advocate since I cured my own tumor when I was 22 years old by myself. I had a uterine tumor, and it wasn't, I was living in New York City. I was 22. I knew nothing. I didn't have any support, didn't have a very happy family life. I was living by myself in New York City, diagnosed with uterine tumor. Doctor said, let's do a biopsy. I just went with my gut and said, no way. And so the reality is that I was supposed to, he wanted me to have it cut out, and I said no. So after 6 months of working on myself and my diet, it was fixed. And so I cured it. I don't know if it was cancerous or a fibroid or what it was, but it didn't matter to me. I just knew I would fix it. So after that, I started studying. I started studying everything I could get my hands on, and then I studied in Germany for 9 years in naturopathic medicine, and then part of when I was there in 2000 in 1985, in 1986, Chernobyl blew up, and I was studying in Germany and France when it happened, and they didn't announce it to the general public for 2 weeks after it blew up. They didn't announce it because they didn't want to hurt the tourist trade in the south of France.
Wow.
So I was getting sick, very sick. I couldn't, my knees were swollen. I had the flu. I was having aches. My hair started falling out. I was in bed with fevers, and I went to the health providers the doctors that I was studying with, and they said, oh, you have radiation poisoning. I said, where the heck could I get that? A week later, they announced that it had blown up. And so I was exposed to that level, and it was, so I learned how to cure it. And I had to cure myself. And I did that with homeopathy and with the diet, which I have now available for everyone to make sure that they are not a victim of, you have your choice. You don't have to be a victim. You can be empowered. There's really no in between, So I have developed different protocols for people to heal themselves and to protect themselves and their children from radiation poisoning. But the tumor that I had when I was 22 was caused from my emotions, I'm sure, and from the lifestyle that I was living. And in order to fix the tumor and get rid of it, I didn't take any supplements. It was a long time ago. It was like, I'm 65 now, so it was a very long time ago. And I changed my diet, read a book by Pablo Arola called How to Get Well. I did the tumor protocol. So I changed my diet and worked on my thinking, and that's all. I didn't even know about vitamin C and nothing. And I think that your mind can do so much, and people do not understand the importance that their belief system plays in their body. So
let's talk about in your studies, since your early success with your own body, I'm sure you've come to understand exactly how the mind impacts the body, or if not exactly, largely how the mind impacts the body. So how do people change their belief systems? They got to their belief systems through poor information and through dysfunctional emotional learning. So you're stuck with the dysfunctional emotional learning at a level that you don't usually think about. How do you change a belief system?
Well, that's a very, very good point, and perfectly aligned with what's going on with the Fukushima disaster. And to my point, and to our point, the Japanese, there's an article in the paper the last few days that the fundamental causes of why Fukushima happened was ingrained in the conventions of the Japanese culture. In other words, their tendency towards obedience, obey the government, their reluctance to question authority. See, though that's a belief system. Their devotion to creating harmony no matter what. It caused them to lay down, lay back, and not question what was going on. And so, in essence, the government and the TEPCO could run over everything and do whatever they wanted because the people are docile. You know what I'm saying? And I totally believe in harmony within my personal life and creating it with other people and creating it in every way I can. But when you see that there's potential for a problem because Japanese is an earthquake-prone area, you've got to investigate and stand up for what you believe in. But these people have a belief that obedience is better. And just sticking with the program and their groupism is better. So that's their belief system. And so in order to change that, it takes one person to stand up and get it on the news and say it's not okay. This is not okay. This beliefism, this groupism has killed people. So let's look at changing it. So as a whole, people can work on changing it as a whole.
That is exactly the issue here. There's a holistic approach to culture as well as to individual healing, and this is real important.
Right. So we in the United States, we have San Onofre, which is in California, where I am. We have many other nuclear plants, and the same thing could happen here. If you think that it can't happen here, then you're wrong, because I have patients that live near the San Onofre nuclear plant that I've tested in my office, and they have radiation exposure. They even have little sirens in the neighborhood that go off when there's a nuclear release. That's going to really help you,
Not only can it happen again, the reality was brought back to us very starkly. We were having dinner, Ralph and General
Bert and I were having dinner with a man who was the CEO of the world's second largest nuclear engineering corporation. He said, the inevitability of a Fukushima in the United States is 100%. Every one of nuclear reactors on this planet is a potential Fukushima. Obedience is, in fact, if it's obedience to the nuclear industry, if it's obedience to the government pronouncements of no harm to human health, is in fact signing one's own and one's world's death warrant. It's that clear. And as a matter of fact, this week, the Natural Solutions Foundation held a webinar on which General Burt spoke extensively and in great detail about the Fukushima failures and about what people need to do. If there were a brief exposure to radiation, the strategies that we know of in natural medicine to detoxify and to help repair the damage that ionizing radiation causes would be sufficient. Our problem now is that our obedience and our permission for the corporation and the government powers to come together and become one huge entity, which is the only reason that we have nuclear power, totally unregulated in any meaningful way. Our obedience has allowed this continuing disaster to spew out upon us. And what we have now is a continuing and mounting radiation presence. And I'd like to ask, as a physician who has suffered from and considered very deeply how to help others from the issues of radiation poisoning, I'd like you to talk a little about the difference between a short-term exposure, no matter how intense, and a continuing exposure like the one that we have now.
Right. Well, you know, that's a good point, but a short-term exposure, you can take the iodine that they pass out, which helps to protect the thyroid short-term, and so you know you can overcome that, but you have to understand that it travels in the jet stream. So even a short-term exposure, a major short-term exposure, is going to travel globally in the jet stream. You know, and then a long-term exposure is devastating to the earth, to the sea, to our food. It's in our food chain now. It's all over the West Coast, but not just the West Coast. It travels with the jet stream. So, it's devastating, and we need to take care of our bodies, our children. We need to not lay down and let this happen. We need to stand up and make phone calls and picket and do whatever we need to do. There's no reason to have nuclear power plants. We can get our electricity from the sun and from the water and from everything. It's all possible, from the wind. So
to say nothing of zero-point energy, which is a reality as well. Of course, we don't need nuclear power any more than we need fossil fuel power, which is equally insane. However, the urgent devastation, aside from the wars that the fossil fuel industry relies upon, the devastation of our environment from nuclear power is cataclysmic, and it's an emergency now. So let's talk about the physical things that people need to do. We, the Natural Solutions Foundation, urges people to seriously consider what we call low radiation migration. Excuse me. That means leaving the northern hemisphere and migrating to the southern hemisphere, unless and until
we find technologies that can actually remove the radiation, not just condense it for hazardous waste disposal. And that technology does not currently, at least if it exists, we haven't found it and developed it into a practical system. So for right now, the reality is that Fukushima is going to continue to contaminate us. San Onofre is going to continue to contaminate us, hopefully not quite as cataclysmically. So let's talk about what people can do either before they migrate to the southern hemisphere or if they don't migrate to the southern hemisphere.
Well, Dr. LeBeau, the thing that I did to heal myself, which is what people should want to know, how to protect themselves and how to heal themselves. To protect yourself, you need to use a homeopathic product, which is really how I healed myself. The protocol for my doing that was a homeopathic remedy that I developed. It has all the things they can throw at you, from the homeopathic cesium-131 to the strontium to the uranium through the plutonium, every different type of nuclear radiation it has in it homeopathically. So it is the cure to protect your body, almost like a vaccine. And the only thing that can make it not work.
I hope that unlike that it actually works.
The only thing that could make it not work is if you drink caffeine, because homeopathy, you don't want to drink caffeine. You don't want to have any caffeine. So, but you could take it. You don't even need to take it every day as a preventative. You could take it 3 days a week, 4 days a week. A few drops. It's liquid. It's homeopathic. Yes, and it is FDA registered. But besides that, I did saunas. I did niacin. I went because I really was exposed. I went to various gyms and detoxified my liver, worked on my liver, created a liver whole body cleanse to get the filtering organs working so that it would dump. You know, homeopathy is wonderful, it'll work, but in addition to that, you want to do a detox to make your body dump everything so that it's effective. But on a daily basis, I would take iodine in a natural form as possible, and you don't need to take a lot of it, but you need to take maybe around 5 to 12.5 milligrams, depending upon how close you are to the radiation. I mean, you know, and if you're not close, then the homeopathic radiation should work. It does work because it cured me.
Now, I want to ask a question that I'm sure is in the minds of lots of people. Homeopathic remedies start with the substance and then dilute, and add energy in the form of succussion or pounding. So if you're using radioactive materials to begin your homeopathic remedy creation, is the homeopathic remedy that results radioactive? People are going to be asking that.
Well, that's a really good question. First of all, it's made in licensed pharmacies that are homeopathic licensed pharmacies. So the method for making it is absolutely 100% clean. In other words, there's no active radiation in the product. It is not active with radiation. It just has the memory or the imprint of the actual radiation, all the different types of radiation in it. So it's diluted enough where there's no physical substance in it. It's just the memory or the imprint of it. And what it does is when you take it, it tracks along, it goes along the acupuncture meridians, the energy channels in your body, and it finds the most similar frequency and it neutralizes it. So it just finds its way in the body to the radiation if you have it in your body, and it neutralizes it. And for people who don't know about radiation, I would say it's time to get on board and to learn more, because it could save your life. Homeopathic medicine has saved people's lives. It's very prominent and popular in every other country but the United States. So that's, and the reason is in the United States is because of the big drug pharmacies. So the drug pharmas, they want to control everyone, make drugs, and so even though the FDA has registered and approved homeopathic medicine, they also can take a substance if it becomes very popular, and they can tell the pharmacies not to make it anymore because they want to close them down. They can do that too. So my point is that we're in good shape with this remedy, okay? If it was on CNN tomorrow, it would probably be taken off the market by the FDA. It would not affect me, but would affect the pharmacies that make it. So a lot of this information has to be delivered underground and through shows like yours, and all the radio shows that I do on a pretty consistent basis. So homeopathy is something that is there to be used. It's used in all countries. In Germany and other countries, they have a homeopathic remedy for all diseases, every disease you can think of. With radiation, which is what we're talking about, I have a remedy that is put together with everything that you need to protect your body like a vaccine. Okay? So when you take it...
How can people get this? Maybe we should stop using the simile or metaphor of the vaccine, since they don't work and they're very dangerous. Homeopathic remedies cure, homeopathic remedies detox, homeopathic remedies strengthen, and unlike vaccines, they cause no harm and actually do their job.
Right. So that's true, and vaccines are bad. We all know that. And all people who listen to your show at least know that. And the reality is if you think of a perfect substance that will protect your body, that's what homeopathy can do, and that's what this homeopathic radiation remedy does. Now, you're so right about vaccines, and actually for health providers only, I have made homeopathic remedies to detoxify vaccines, and they're used in other countries as a vaccine. You can use homeopathy instead of a harmful vaccine. You can use it to protect the body, without it being a harmful vaccine like there are in the United States and in other countries.
This is very interesting. Last night, during the webinar on the Fukushima failures and the implications, we were talking about bringing pets, in that case, to Uruguay, and General Burt mentioned that the Uruguayan government requires rabies vaccines for cats and dogs, and I said that what I would do is give a pet a homeopathic vaccination or inoculation, and have the veterinarian who had to sign the form sign that way. Let's talk about homeopathic vaccinations. They are effective, based in science, and completely harmless. If vaccines are required, if mandatory vaccines are required, my advice is always to have a physician sign a vaccine card or letter after having used a homeopathic vaccination. Let's talk a little about
homeopathic vaccines because they too are life-saving, because they avoid pharmaceutical vaccines, and because they actually work.
Right, and so that is so true, and you have to have a physician sign off on it, but I'll tell you, I've traveled the globe. I've traveled everywhere, and I've never taken a vaccine because I refuse to do that. I will never do that. And so instead, I just used homeopathy, and it's always been very effective, and it is effective for people from other countries. They know to do that. In India, you look at India, you look at other countries, you see they have health freedom. Health freedom. In Germany, you can go into a pharmacy and tell the pharmacist that you have cancer. What do they recommend? And they'll bring out homeopathy. They'll ask you what you're interested in. You know, and that's true in some, most European countries.
In Europe, that was true in Europe. I don't know if you've been keeping up with what's happened in Europe, but the European Food Supplements Directive, the FSD, has been clamping down on nutrients, on homeopathics in Germany. There are a number of homeopathics which are illegal now, and a number more for which a prescription is required in Germany. I have a very good friend who is the same kind of doctor that we are, Dr. Sarah Schoens. She's a board-certified immunologist, and she practices natural and nutritional medicine. And if she wants to give an IV, a vitamin C or some other similar nutrient IV to a patient, she has to submit the patient's entire, okay, just a moment, say yes, but put it off for 1 hour. Sorry, that was a domestic issue here. If she wants to give an IV to someone that contains nutrients, she has to submit the patient's entire record to the federal German medical department. They have to agree. Then she has to physically travel to one of two laboratories. The nearest one is many hours away from her, and she has to mix the IV on camera with her hands visible at all times so that it's date stamped with her image mixing the IV. Then she has to take the IV back to Dusseldorf where she lives, treat the patient, and she can only do this for one infusion. First of all, can you imagine how few people are permitted to receive nutritional IVs? Second of all, can you imagine the cost to the patient? And thirdly, what if they need more than one IV? In addition, other natural remedies and herbs have been made illegal. So what used to be an open, very, very free system for people to make choices has become a fascist pharma fusion.
Well, the things have changed because of Codex, and it has affected some homeopathic nosodes, and they've always had that feeling that, even when I studied there, they've always been very restrictive with supplements and nutrients. But I was over there a month ago, and I could go into a pharmacy and get what homeopathic remedy that I couldn't get in the United States. So it just depends. I was also in France, and I could go into a pharmacy and get what I needed at that particular time. With supplements, the Codex, they're very particular, and I don't agree with what they're doing. But there's one thing that I learned, so many things I learned there, but one very important thing about supplements is that people overdo it and can hurt themselves, especially with calcium. And there is a lot of history of people causing kidney stones by taking too much calcium. So I don't agree with the Codex at all, but I know when I studied there, they were very insistent that we didn't have people take calcium.
Well, I think that has to do with the form of calcium. If you eat
um, seashells, and if you eat rocks, your body probably is going to have some serious difficulty with its metabolism, and you're going to wind up with stones in your body because you're eating stones. On the other hand, if you eat biologically available calcium, so chelated by plants, then the calcium is absorbable and you don't have these issues. So it's not the calcium, it's the form of calcium, and that has to do with supplement manufacturers grinding up rocks and eggshells and pretending that it's food. The last time I looked, human beings didn't do very well eating either rocks or seashells.
Right. So anyway, I think that things have been greatly limited in Europe, and there's certain homeopathic no-sodes that I can't get anymore. But in other countries that have pharmacies, and like India, you can pretty much get what you want. But there are other countries that do it. Germany, and the whole European Union has complied. And that's the problem with compliance, is that you get stuff taken away from you, or you get your nuclear plants blown up. You get something, if you comply with the government all the time, people just lie down and they just think, oh, well, there's nothing they can do. And there are things you can do, So I think what we need to do is create find a homeopathic pharmacy somewhere in a country where there are no restrictions as to doing good medicine. That's the key.
Dr. Dale, that's exactly what we've been working on. We've actually created an SEC filed fund for natural solutions, and one of its projects is to either start or purchase an offshore compounding pharmacy. Absolutely.
For the purpose of exactly what you're talking about. And then, once we have the offshore compounding pharmacy, even if a product is not approved in, let's say, the United States, even if a product either has never been registered or the FDA has actively not approved it, a patient, on the recommendation of a healthcare provider, can't be a prescription if it's not an approved substance. There's no way to write a prescription. So on the recommendation of a healthcare provider, a person can order a 3-month supply of whatever it is that they want for personal use, not for resale. And that 3-month supply can be imported legally. That's called compassionate use. That means that anything that people in Europe want, that people in the United States or Canada, which is extremely restrictive in these areas, anything that people want can be legally. We're talking about nutrients and herbs and homeopathics and so on. We're not talking about hallucinogenic or other drugs. We're not talking about drugs at all. But the things that people want and need, despite the ravages of the FDA and the European Food Supplements Directive and other agencies run directly by Big Pharma, they will be available for people on a compassionate use basis. That's why we believe that it's so necessary to have our own compounding pharmacy.
Well, in the time that we have left, there's something that will allow people to really get the importance of this kind of a facility, hopefully a homeopathic facility, because you can understand that when people have like STDs, whether or tuberculosis or gonorrhea or syphilis, all of these kinds of things, there's a homeopathic remedy that's been made for centuries, for years and years and years, that cures it, and it works, and it doesn't suppress the disease, So the reality is that this has all been taken off the market in the United States. I can't even get TB. The pharmacies are afraid to make it for you because they're told by the FDA that they're going to be shut down.
Then what we need is in raising the funding
to create this pharmacy, which of course would produce homeopathic products, also would produce nutrients and supplements as well. We have the Fund for Natural Solutions, www.fundfornaturalsolutions.org, and the purpose is to generate a profit while making a difference through tipping point projects that change the game. One of those tipping point projects is our own compounding pharmacy.
Well, very good. I know that will be something that will be very successful for you. And, just for a couple of seconds, getting back to the radiation, if people want to know more information about that and get some detailed information about how to get help with that, then they can always check out my website.
Would you please give us your website?
Yeah. So it's www.wellnesscenter.net. Wellnesscenter.net.
www.wellnesscenter.net. Now, Dr. Dale, this is the first time that we have spoken, and I'm thrilled that we are doing so. I'm going to be back in contact with you after the conclusion of this interview, and I will see how we can work together as you and I have agreed that we should. We have a series of webinars that we'd like you to participate in. I would like to know more about making sure that your products are available for our people. This is enormously important. I congratulate you for your recovery from 2 serious diseases. Obviously, a practicum is the best way to learn, and you've taken that very seriously. I also congratulate you for being willing to speak out and be a health freedom advocate. The Natural Solutions Foundation is, of course, the largest health freedom organization in the world, and people can sign up at www.healthfreedomusa.org. We are deeply concerned, as you are, with the radiation issue, and I'm very appreciative of your work on that. It would have been nice if you could have learned what you learned and have created what you've created without personal radiation sickness, but as I said, a practicum is a very effective teacher. And we look forward to being in touch and collaborating. You've been very generous with your time, and I appreciate it enormously.
Thank you so much. It's wonderful meeting you. We'll speak again soon, and have a very wonderful day.
Thank you ever so much, Doctor. It has been a pleasure. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Ralph.
All right, Dr. Rima, I'm going to save this. All right, indeed. Dr. Rima, a very interesting interview. I mean, hearing it again without, being able just to listen was fascinating.
Absolutely. It's exciting and inspiring to know that there are lots of people reaching the same kinds of conclusions, although there are some differences, which is fine, to make sure that we kind of check each other. We come to different conclusions, and we come to the same conclusions, but we get there through different channels. I personally am very grateful that I have never had to contend with a massive threat to my health in order to learn what I've learned, but it is one of the effective ways that we become educated.
I'll tell you, Lyme disease certainly taught me a lot about healing. Yes, that can be.
That's an interesting story. Would you like to share that?
Sure. I live in the woods of northwest New Jersey. Therefore, there are many, many Lyme-bearing ticks around. And almost everyone, it seems, has been bit at one point or another. With me, it was, I think it was 1998. I was commuting a couple of days a week to a vitamin company down off the mountain in Morris County, about 40 minutes away from where I live, and got down to the vitamin company and found myself feeling quite ill, and that's when and it was a sore spot on my chest, and I went in the men's room and took a look at it, and there was a hole, a little tiny hole, and a red blotch around it. And I thought I'd definitely been bitten by something, that's for sure. And I decided to leave early, which I did after being told by a number of people that hole is a tick bite. You better get it seen. On the way back home, I felt so ill. I stopped at a friend's house, a lady who was a advanced healthcare practitioner. And first thing she did was put me into a plastic bag that went from my ankles to my wrists and neck, and she pumped it up with ozone. So I napped for an hour in ozone and felt a bit better and went home. I definitely began to develop fevers, and the next day I was at our physician's office. Dr. Vasquez is a fine physician, and he has seen lots and lots of Lyme, and he said to me, that is a Lyme tick bite. The ring will form around the red spot tomorrow. And we discussed options. Actually, one of his assistants thought it might have been a spider bite. He was quite certain it was a tick bite and that it would form the ring. So we discussed emergency use of antibiotics. I talked about silver and other things. We talked about what I would do to detoxify from the antibiotics after I took them, and he put me on 2 antibiotics, one of which was for 1 week and the other for 3 weeks, and I felt really ill. I called him up the next day, and he said, "Oh, that's the antibiotic," which I thought was an interesting thing to say. But I immediately started using silver, and we have a static charged energy device I was using, and lots of course, nutrition. And I sort of began to feel better after a few days. But I continued working with alternative approaches, with advanced healthcare approaches. And one of the things I did was a couple of months later, I was doing a number of things, including the energy work, and we were using sound based on my vocal analysis. And I ended up with Dr. Robbins in New York City, famous Dr. Ozone. At that time, he was still being allowed to give people oxygen. He still is allowed to give people ozone, but at that time, he had in his office, you could come in from the street, sit in a special room that had these big tanks of oxygen, bubbling oxygen through flavored ice and water, and you would breathe the oxygen in and then go back out on the streets of New York City. Apparently, that was too much for the medical authorities, but he was allowed to continue doing the other thing he did, which was injecting people with ozone in its gaseous form. You know, we've been told if you put air into a person's veins, you're going to kill them. Well, he was taking these needles with these large plungers on them and filling it up with ozone and putting it in a vein and pushing the ozone in. And then maybe 3 or 4 minutes later, you might cough once or twice, as it was, I guess, getting through the heart. But he said it dissolved into the blood immediately, and there was no gas that was not dissolved by the time your blood got from the arm to the heart. I did that once a week for 5 weeks with an increasing dose of ozone. And after the 5th one, I had what I can only describe as a healing crisis. That is, we came back home, and I went into a series of surging fevers. It would surge up for an hour, a couple of hours, maybe an hour or two, and then come back down again, then surge back up again. And that went on for about 24 hours, and it broke. And I don't really believe I have any leftovers from Lyme disease, although there might be. There was an incident about 5 years after that where a friend decided to use an energy analysis and balancing device on me. She had gotten intuitively that I still had some alleged Lyme leftovers, and she found that the leftovers were in my lymph nodes, and so she sent some energy at me from a distance. She didn't exactly have my informed consent, actually, at the time, but that's okay. We all learn from a lot of things. Because within 24 hours, my lymph nodes were blown up, and I could not raise my arms, very far at all. And for a number of days, I was trying different things to deal with that. And finally, I turned to a Holter Clark static charge device with one of those imprint plates on it, and there was a lymph cleanse. I think it was a nosode, a homeopathic nosode on the plate, and within a couple of hours, the lymph nodes were completely down. And I've had nothing that I can really identify as a leftover from Lyme since then. And it's been 14 years. I've also haven't been bit again.
As a licensed physician,
Yeah.
I'm supposed to be concerned with the fact that treatments are supposed to be approved by the FDA. So let me ask you whether the FDA approved the treatments that you use to apparently completely resolve a case of Lyme disease.
Well, I did use the antibiotic. I think if I ever get bit again, I may not use any antibiotics. I'm not, I recognize that sometimes in an emergency situation, but on the other hand, Dr. Rima, I remember your story about malaria and nano silver. I think that today, there's no immunity conferred on anyone by having had Lyme disease. Today, if I got bit again, I would probably not subject myself to the antibiotic. But I would just
Let me point out that the use of doxycycline within hours of being bitten is probably the only human antibiotic use that I would recommend. Why not just do nanosilver? Because we don't have the scientific documentation that says that nanosilver is effective against the spirochete that causes Lyme disease. I believe it is, but Lyme disease is so devastating that to me, the one use of antibiotics that I would condone in human beings, and this is a bit illogical, the one use that I would condone is the use of doxycycline for 10 days following the discovery that you've been bitten by a tick. And you have to assume not just deer ticks, but all ticks in endemic areas, all ticks are infested with the spirochete. Therefore, it is reasonable to me to take the antibiotic. If you don't have the antibiotic, or if you don't want the side effects of the antibiotic, then I would say it's also reasonable simply to take the nanosilver. Because logically, since nanosilver has been effective against every pathogen that it's been tried against, there's no reason to think that there's anything special about the Lyme spirochete. However, if you want to wear a belt and suspenders and take both the doxycycline and the nanosilver, go right ahead. But if you have Lyme disease, you really need the nanosilver, and you need it chronically, because as the spirochete goes through its replication cycle, that's where you're able to kill it. As the spirochete goes into an active phase, that's where you're able to kill it. So if you have Lyme disease, or thinking of Lyme disease, or are suffering from the after effects of Lyme disease, I would urge taking the nanosilver. Now, the nanosilver that we recommend, and it's not the only nanosilver on the market, we just happen to think that because it is frequency infused, and the frequency infusion has been stabilized through the work of the astoundingly advanced material scientist Dr. Rustam Roy, who is a professor emeritus at the University of Pennsylvania and the University of Arizona. Because of his input into this nanosilver, we are very enthusiastic about it. And you can get it if you want our nanosilver. You can get it at www.neutronics, NUTRONIX.com/natural solutions. Ralph, will you put that on?
I sure have. I've put it up on both the live Ustream, which you can see by going to healthfreedomportal.org, and also on the chat. I also, by the way, Dr. Rima, put another website up with a soon online note on it, and that is, of course, healmedrrima.com.
Exactly, but
we have,
go there yet. There's nothing much happening there right now. We're redoing the way you find our information. We'll continue to put out the same style of information, but the way you find it and how it looks and how it's organized will be much, much streamlined. I want to point out that the zapper, the Hulda Clark zapper that you used, was not FDA approved.
That's for sure. And the energy device I used was not FDA approved. And probably the use of ozone wasn't FDA approved. And probably the use of vitamins, which they might think was intended to treat disease, but as we know, is never intended to treat disease, but only to support the normal structure and function of the body.
Absolutely. Well, the FDA, we can play games and we can say it's never used to treat disease and it's about the normal structure and function of the body, and it's true, but that's a legalistic manipulation that we have to go through. Gary Null has put out a new full-length documentary in which Ralph and I figure prominently. It's called War on Health: The FDA's Cult of Tyranny. And I have put up on Ralph's Skype a link that allows you to get to it. War on Health, the FDA's Cult of Tyranny. Gary Null makes lots and lots and lots of really important videos, and I'm proud to say I've done several of them. So has Ralph. When Gary makes a new video, he says, "Hey, can we film you?" So we're pleased to collaborate. We think he's doing very, very important. War on Health, the FDA's Cult of Tyranny, is an important new documentary. And by the way, Ralph and I appear gratis. We're not paid. Our expenses are not even paid. We do this because we want the information out there. We make no money when a copy is sold. This is simply information that you need, and therefore we participate with anybody who is getting the information out there. People often say, "Oh, well, you have appeared," to me and to Ralph, you have appeared in the Citizens Commission on Human Rights documentaries, and they're associated with the Church of Scientology. You must be associated with the Church of Scientology. Nope, neither one of us is, but we're associated with the truth. And if the Citizens Commission on Human Rights is putting out the truth about psychiatry, which they so aptly call an industry of death, which it is, and I tell you that as a psychiatrist, which is why I never, ever, ever have used psychiatric drugs, never, ever, ever. But many psychiatric drugs are merely fluoride delivery systems, and you need to know that. So the point is that whoever is disseminating truth, we will participate with, because what's important is the truth. What is important is the truth.
Dr. Rima, what you just said is so important. We need to repeat this. Most psychiatric drugs are just fluoride delivery systems?
Yes, sir.
Wow.
And that's why when you take them, you feel like you're no longer really alive. You feel, people tell me, I've never taken one, but people tell me they feel like their highs and their lows have been cut off, that they get through life, but they are without passion. It is part of the mobilization of apathy.
Wow.
And 25% of U.S. adults are on psychiatric drugs.
20,000 of U.S. soldiers in Afghanistan and Iraq were also on psychiatric drugs, and yet before 1990, it was against Army rules for anyone on a medication like that to be allowed anywhere near combat.
Let me point out what happens to the neurology of somebody on a psychiatric medication in a state of high adrenal arousal. Now, if somebody's shooting at you, or if you're on patrol and you know that you're likely to get killed, your adrenal glands go into high drive, and your sympathetic nervous system, the fight or flight system, goes into high drive because you're in a life-threatening situation. That's a very appropriate thing to have happen. Are we clear? It's not inappropriate to be in a fight or flight situation when somebody's trying to kill you. You're in a war zone, okay? What happens is that adrenal overdrive triggers excessive violence because the drug takes away the modulation. Okay, I'm scared, but I really shouldn't start firing my submachine gun into this crowd of civilians. No, that judgment is taken away by the neuroactive drug. In addition to which, your own suicidality, your own violence against yourself is triggered. Your ability to preserve your own life from your own impulses is impaired. So people become excessively violent. They commit war atrocities. No, they commit drug atrocities. And they become excessively suicidal. They commit self-atrocities because their ability to self-moderate in the face of extreme adrenal arousal is damaged or destroyed. That's what you get when you give people in combat zones psychiatric medication.
Wow. And it's exactly what's been happening. More American soldiers dying of suicide than battle wounds.
Let me switch the topic for a moment because we only have 8 minutes left, or 7 minutes left for the show. There is a movement afoot, and some of it has been represented by postings on our No Genetically Modified Food Forum on yahoo.com and other places, to ask the United Nations to make various atrocious behaviors illegal. There is a movement afoot to ask the United Nations, and this was published in Reuters, to prohibit geoengineering projects. No. If you go to the United Nations as the arbiter of what is permitted and what is forbidden, you are acknowledging the global government. No. It's very tempting to say, oh, our daddy, the United States government, is not taking good care of us. Let's go to the bigger daddy. Let's go to the global government and get them to shelter and take care of us. The global government is going to kill you. The global government wants you dead. Read Agenda 21. See my earlier comments. The point is, we do not go to the UN as a point of resort. We do not ask for help from the UN. We try to get the United States the hell out of the United Nations. We try to disavow, disempower, disembowel the United Nations. Hello, folks. Where are your heads? What are we talking about? Let's go to the United Nations to ask them to prohibit geoengineering. Do you really think that the United Nations is not involved with geoengineering? Hello? Do you really think that the United Nations and NATO are not co-partners in global terror? Hello? Do you really think that the United Nations is not a vaccine pumping organization? It was the United Nations, the World Health Organization, contract organization
for the United Nations that spread AIDS in Africa through its smallpox eradication, quote, quote, program. Hello, the United Nations is a death machine. Let's be clear about that and not buy into the comforting pap propaganda about the United Nations, shall we?
Indeed, Dr. Rima. Yes, and of course, again, it goes back to the same thing. The closer the governance to the people being governed, the more effective it's going to be. Can you imagine how much more effective local food safety would be compared to international food safety? Example, Codex. It's obviously we want to make people in their own communities empowered. We want to allow them to be empowered to protect themselves, to have the resources to protect themselves, and that's so important. Resources are a key.
These days, international is a synonym for multinational corporation.
Yep.
So you don't want international control of anything. As you said, Ralph, you want local control of everything. Now that people say, well, that'll take us back to the balkanization of the planet. I trust balkanization more than I trust globalization.
But it's a balkanization with modern communications. So, for example, we were able to find out that down in the Balkans in Serbia, the wonderful developments in non-GMO feed for farm animals had been illegally destroyed, and our hope to find a source there turned out to be false. But we knew about it because of modern communications.
Absolutely. I want to point out something about Fukushima real quickly before we have to stop, and that is that the Carnegie Endowment discovered or decided that they could accurately say that Fukushima was a man-made disaster. A special parliamentary report which was presented to the Parliament of Japan a couple of days ago said Fukushima was a made-in-Japan disaster, a man-made disaster.
But I disagree that it was made in Japan, however. It is certainly a man-made disaster. Those reactors were designed by GE, so it's
They were installed, the MOX, the mixed oxides of plutonium reactors were installed, although they're illegal in most countries, including the U.S., they were installed with the help of the United States government. But the disaster was man-made. Now, General Burt did his second Fukushima webinar called Fukushima Failures, an Update. And it's a very important webinar. In your latest e-blast from the Natural Solutions Foundation, you will find some buttons that you can click on to buy not only the first and not only the second webinar, Fukushima Failures Update, but also the first, the low radiation migration. And we've created a special discount price for both webinars. Very, very, very inexpensive. If you're thinking about needing information, accurate information, and if you're thinking about the possibility of getting out, of migrating, you need to these webinars, and the way to do that is to buy the 2 ebooks. The ebooks contain the webinar, they contain additional updated and expanded information. They're very, very important.
I'm posting that link, Dr. Rima, on the chat and also on the window.
Outstanding. We've had a really exciting show, very, very productive, I think, and I'm pleased and proud to be a part of this show. I think it really offers important and leading edge information, and I thank you for being my collaborator on this, Ralph. You've been listening to the Dr. Rima Reports. Today's edition, July 8th, will be archived, as all of our shows are. The archive can be found at healthfreedomportal.org. We'll be back next week, and you will be here, I'm delighted to say, or you'll be listening on the archives. Remember, it's your world, your health,
your way.